that for me was my biggest aha when I realized that the root of the majority of unhealthy conflict that happens is because of thoughts that are unseen to other people but are occurring in our head.
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a good one. Our guest is the founder of Navigating Challenging Dialogue, which is a proven framework for transforming workplace culture. And she's also the author of Mastering Feedback, Everything You've Never Been Told About How to Give Feedback. Beth Wonson, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
It's a fantastic opportunity, and it's a fantastic topic. I mean, I don't think that we've had anyone on the show that has written a book about feedback, but we have talked a lot about feedback. So I think it's going to be interesting to hear your story and also arm our audience with some great tools to get feedback and give feedback and all that good stuff. But before we get into it, Beth, tell us about your career journey leading up to this point.
So I began my career, surprisingly, people are shocked by this, as a public school assistant principal. And I often say that I'm a recovering school administrator because it was really quite an experience, particularly around navigating challenging dialogue. I then moved into a consulting and training company. And I quickly rose through the ranks. I came in a very entry-level position, but I was really good at what I did. The tasks that I did, I was a high-performing employee. And so I quickly got promoted to manager status, but I realized that I had no training in the soft skills or the human skills of management. And so I was really depending on what had been modeled to me. And I realized after about 8 years that while my team achieved our goals and did really great work and was high performing in that regard, my management style could have generated a healthier work culture and a lot better results. So that's when I began studying brain-based research, social and emotional intelligence, adult learning theory, how adults communicate and show up, what motivates us intrinsically, and began developing Navigating Challenging Dialogue. That was in about 2008 that I began working on this, and then I founded my own company, and here we are today.
Wow. And so now that you founded your own company, you've really become an expert in your space around communication. Well, what type of clients do you typically have?
My clients range from anything to solo entrepreneurs to corporations. We do a lot of government work, and we work a lot in the tech sector with some of the big tech companies that everybody's familiar with.
And, in this discovery of communication, you did a deep dive into this over the years. What were some surprising things that you learned along the way?
Some surprising things that I learned was how much traditional business training leaves out the humanistic side of it. How much people's egos are triggered by the desire for reputation, the desire to protect ourselves, fear of being blamed, fear of not looking like the expert, and how much that impacts our relationship with other people when we don't understand how to take a minute, challenge our thoughts, and then proceed from a place of facts versus a place of emotion. So in thinking about the folks in your audience, I'm sure everyone can identify a time when they've had a client on the line or someone who's challenging their expertise, their authority, their knowledge. And before they know it, they've gone into a defensive and protective mode versus into curiosity, empathy, problem solving, collaboration, allowing the client to be fully heard, even if we don't necessarily agree with them. So that for me was my biggest aha when I realized that the root of the majority of unhealthy conflict that happens is because of thoughts that are unseen to other people, but are occurring in our head.
So true. And so powerful. I mean, it's there, it's happening. And I mean, I can relate, as you were saying those things, I can relate. And yet, why do you think it's such a big gap in terms of the training and how people are being prepared for this?
Well, I think it's relatively new, and by new I mean past 10 years, to really be thinking about the brain and the brain-based research that's out around how our brain processes, how it wants to protect us. I think it's pretty new. I also think that most people prefer to learn the tactical skills, how do I start a company? What do I need to know? How do I use this software, that software? What program's better? Where do my debits and credits belong? All the questions around that. We're more comfortable mastering that than we are looking internally to say, okay, how do my thoughts get in my way of creating success? How do my thoughts get in my way of developing customer relationships so that they lean into me, they depend on me, they trust my expertise, and they continue to come back for more? I think it's easier to think, what new program can I get? What new software can I get? What kind of online marketing can I do? Those things are more comfortable to think about.
Absolutely. And, we can go and buy a new software and we can, learn a new technical thing quite easily. It's all readily available, but working on our own software is not so much. And yet the opportunity for doing so is quite great. I mean, maybe tell us some stories of where you've helped an organization or people inside of a business take a look at doing some of this work and what the outcomes have been.
Sure. So many times I get phone calls from people, leaders, managers, you name it, or even employees who are telling me about a symptom, right? There's a symptom happening. Morale is low. Staff don't trust each other. Or there's a specific employee who's been troublesome for quite a period of time. And the organization has created all kinds of workarounds to support them, but not been direct in communication around feedback with them. And so what they call me about almost 99% of the time is a symptom of the fact that people don't feel safe having tough conversations. People are fearful that there will be consequences for speaking their truth, or there'll be some kind of repercussions. And those aren't necessarily overt. They can be that the manager or supervisor you're talking to suddenly doesn't put you on the projects that the most desirable, or they're not inviting you to the specific meetings, or they feel challenged by you in some way. And so people tend to keep their mouth shut. And what happens is that the problems that could be really small problems are now big, complex problems because people aren't comfortable speaking their truth. So when I get those phone calls, I always begin with asking some questions, doing some assessment, and doing the basic navigating challenging dialogue training. And when we do that workshop with folks and they begin to hear what the mantras are of the program, like the only person I can manage is myself. grace is in the space, meaning take a pause and assess what your thoughts are. At the end of the day, everyone wants to be seen and heard. How do I listen to people? How do I have curiosity? Once we begin to do that kind of work with folks, the kind of people begin to understand what the root of the problem is. I also do a lot of coaching with supervisors and managers who are resistant or fearful to give feedback. And so I work with specific scenarios and help them identify. We have a 4-step process for how to give feedback, which is in the book that you mentioned, Mastering Feedback. And it takes people through that 4-step process of how to deliver fact-based feedback that doesn't cause drama and chaos.
I mean, valuable in that. And I mean, thinking of it from customers, family members, staff members. I mean, if we don't give feedback, if we don't speak the truth, well, we can't get to any kind of way of the world that we actually want. I mean, if you think about it, if we want something to happen, the better we are at giving feedback and have that other side get that feedback constructively and do something with it and go in a direction that's more appropriate for wherever we're trying to move the business or our life. I mean, the impact is huge.
It's huge. And it's so funny because after we do the training, people always contact me and they're like, oh my gosh, I used this with my teenager and it shifted the whole conversation, or I used it with my partner or spouse or mother-in-law or neighbor, whatever. And so people always say to me, why do you work with people in the workplace? And I say, because that's where they spend the majority of their time. And that's where I can get access to them the easiest. But the mission of our company is to share this tool as widely and profoundly as we can, because I believe it has the potential. I don't believe, I've seen over the 10 years and thousands of people I've trained, it has the potential to shift the way we engage and communicate and show up and how healthy and honest our relationships are. And the world needs that right now. That I know.
Yes, absolutely. And so the interesting thing is that this work will impact not only a person's life and their relationships with all the people in their personal life, but also all the people inside of their business life. And we often talk about our audience, our listener right now, people that work with small and medium-sized businesses. There's typically an owner in that business who has several staff, likely lots of people that are involved with them. And so it's not only helping them through their numbers and improve their business, but again, through providing great feedback and communication as to how they can help them change their business, right? How they can improve their business. Yes. I mean, it's kind of an interesting way of thinking about it. But if we're preparing a file and we're going through the numbers with a business owner, I mean, we're giving them feedback as to how they're running their business. I mean, this is pretty interesting angle to be thinking about. Like you were talking to your family member, giving them feedback, sensitive information. It can cause all sorts of drama and conflict and all sorts of things. Well, it's no different when you're communicating to a business owner.
Well, I love working with people in the bookkeeping field, and I love working with people in the real estate field, because there's nothing more emotional than your money or the security of where you're going to be living. And so even though we may not realize it, when you're working in that profession and you're talking to a business owner or an individual about their money, they're already in an emotionally elevated state. They're already having thoughts about what you're going to say to them and what it means about to them. Does it mean they're good or bad? Does it mean they're successful or not successful? We know that people have a lot of shame around money. So if you know how to begin the conversation in a way that is going to be curious, engaging, listening to the other person, and you're really present in that, versus it's another thing you have to tick off and you want to deliver this as fast as you can, it might take a couple minutes, maybe 3 or 4 extra minutes on the front end, but the back end of the conversation is going to go much better because you're going to help that person to de-escalate. before you get into the call. I know every time my CPA or my bookkeeper emails me and says we need to talk about something, I know where my brain goes. I've done something bad. Things aren't good. I need to worry about something. I know I get escalated and I have to bring myself down so I can be really present for the phone call. And 90% of the time, it's not about anything bad. They might just need a form or information. But my brain tells me I'm not safe.
We often hear about clients being challenging or they're not good clients. And the reality is that there's a good chance that they are the way that they are because of everything that you've said. They're in a heightened state. And so any interaction with them is in a volatile state. And so with a little bit of pre-work, as you say, that could take the volatility down and actually turn them into a great client just by being able to communicate more powerfully. So you said something about taking a little bit more time on the front end. Can you share a little bit about what that might look like for our listener to actually apply?
Yes, sure. I would love to. So navigating challenging dialogue is about you. It's not about the client, and it's not about manipulating conversation to get what you want. It's about you taking a minute before the conversation starts to take a breath in through your nose, down into your lungs, exhale, let go of whatever tension is you're bringing to the conversation that doesn't belong there. For instance, if your child's not doing their virtual homeschool learning and they're not paying attention and they're driving you crazy and you know you just have to get this phone call over, set that aside for the next half hour. If it's fear of whether or not the client's going to like you or keep you, breathe in on the exhale, set that aside just for a minute. And take a pause and just feel in your heart. Listen to, feel, or imagine the beating of your heart. Sounds silly, so simple, but that heartbeat has been with you since 6 weeks after conception. It's witnessed every step of your journey, and your mind cannot hold anxiety or stress and gratitude simultaneously. So if you can't think of anything to feel grateful for in that second, just listen for the beat of your heart and be grateful for that. Mm-hmm. And then begin the conversation from that place, from that clear and clean place. Make a list of exactly what are the facts, the absolute facts that you need to talk to this client about. Not how you feel, not what you think, not worst case scenario or projection, not in this moment when you're delivering hard information. Just what are the facts? I got a notice from the IRS. This paperwork wasn't correct. We need to put that together by X day. And then ask them a question. What do you think your next step might be? How do you think you might proceed from here? You want to empower your client to be able to take action when you're delivering difficult news. So creating that, or with anyone, no matter who it is, your child, your spouse, it doesn't matter. A business partner, somebody that you collaborate with, the CPA you're working with. What do you think the next step might be on this project? So that you are empowering them to take action. And then you can hear from them how they would approach it. Because the truth is, when we prescribe steps, what we're really doing is prescribing how we would approach a challenge. But we all have different working styles. We all have different learning styles. We all have different thinking styles. And so you can prescribe the next steps and your person can agree with you performatively to get you off the phone or off the line. And in their mind, they're going, I'm not doing that. That's not the way I would do it. I don't think she's right. So you want that to come out in this next piece of the conversation. What do you think your next step might be? And if someone says, I don't know, This is the best question when someone says, I don't know. I hear that. Tell me what you don't know. I don't know how to begin. I don't know how to find the form online. I don't know. I don't understand the terminology you're talking with. But if you keep pulling back the layers through curiosity, you're going to empower them to take action. You're going to find out what the roadblock is, and it's going to move forward, and they're going to feel empowered, and they're going to go, wow, that was a great call. I really feel heard.
Amazing. If you think about it, so much is lost because we're moving so fast, trying to get it done. And if you think about, I think in my own life, someone said to me, I don't know. If I said, hey, what's your next step? They say, I don't know. Well, here you go. I'll give you them. Right? They take these steps. Whereas really it's an opportunity to go slow it down. It's like, well, what is it? What part about it don't you know? It's another layer of understanding. And like you say, curiosity, key word there, being curious. You can really see that we're not talking about a lot more time, but we are talking about more time. We're talking about slowing it down in order to speed it up, which is if you do that, if you collect that information, ask those questions, truly listen for these opportunities to have deeper, more truth-based communication, the speed of the relationship, the speed of the results, the work that you're trying to do is all going to go up, but it's not going to feel that way in the beginning.
Yeah, it's a practice, right? It's a practice because your tendency, we've been socialized to be the expert. When you get a job, when you go to school, everywhere in the world, we're told, be the expert, show them what you know, tell them what you know. If you are so emotionally exhausted at the end of the day that your brain feels like sludge, you're like, I don't want to do this work anymore. I could almost guarantee that you are spending so much time in expert mode and people are spending so much time taking from you versus doing their own thinking, that is what's wearing you down. It's particularly if you went into bookkeeping because you love the work, you love learning about all this, you love being in it. It's not the work that's exhausting you. It's the fact that you have trained your customers to treat you like Siri or Alexa, where they just throw out a problem or a question and you immediately and reflexively come up with the answer instead of pausing and saying, oh, wow, that's a great question. What do you think your next step might be? Oh, that's a great question. What do you think the solution might be? Oh, that's fantastic. Have you had this challenge before and how did you solve it? So you want to begin empowering them to do some of their thinking. And it's a great way to put some coaching practice into your bookkeeping practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just thinking now around staff, if you think about when people ask for help, we've been brought up to help people, and our community, our listener is, they're part of the type of people that love to help people. And that's their characteristic. It's predominant in the industry. And so it's deep to the core that if someone said, hey, could you help me? Could you solve this for me? Could you do all the things that you've just said? They're like, it's like a debate that they're going to go after. And if you think about staff, the training of the Siri or Alexa, it's like, hey, I don't know how to do this. It's like, well, let me show you. Because to say no, to say, well, figure it out on your own would likely occur as being mean or being selfish or, not being helpful.
That's why it's critical to be affirmative first. That's a great question. I hear you're struggling with that. I understand this is a challenge for you. What do you think your first step would be? If you were going to solve this on your own, where would you begin? And to begin to get them thinking, when I've done this training, which I've done hundreds of times with managers who are so overwhelmed from the same questions or the same kind of questions or the continual interruptions for information that people could readily find on their own. When I first do the training, they all say to me, people aren't going to like me. People are going to think I'm difficult or I'm not willing to help them. And then when I talk to them a month later, they're like, Beth, this took so much stress off me. And my staff is now saying to me, oh, yeah, I started to come in and ask you. And I thought, What Michael would say to me if I go in there and ask him is, what might your first step be? So now they're starting the first step or the third step, and they're not coming until they're a little further into the problem. When we're interrupted, if we're in the zone and we're working on a project and someone interrupts us, it takes 17 minutes to get back to that level of concentration when we were just in the zone, fully focused. Even if someone just says, hey, you got a minute? That interruption pulls you back up to where you were when you started the project. It's going to take you 17 uninterrupted minutes to get back into the same zone. And so you need to retrain people to begin to do some thinking on their own. And the way to do it with empathy and compassion is to say, oh, I hear that's a challenge for you. What do you think your first step might be? What do you think you might do about that?
And I would imagine it would be challenging for someone who's not used to doing that to do it in the first place. Like you said, they say, oh, I won't be liked. I mean, they have to conquer some deep-rooted fears themselves. But once they do it, and they do it consistently, it probably isn't very long for people to shift their own behavior because, like you say, they hear they're just going to ask me. It's going to be more difficult for them to ask the question because they're just going to get that question answered. Like the person said, well, I was going to walk into your office, but now I realized, hey, I can maybe just figure this out on my own. I mean, the just on that one thing, the lift for if you had a couple of staff and you did that for a week, the lift it would give onto your productivity would be huge. And so I think that's amazing. I don't want to step over that, but I also don't want to step over this whole concept of focus and interruption. And if we think about where we're at right now today with our kids are at home, our spouses are at home, partners, all that good stuff. I mean, how are we getting anything done if it's going to take us 17 minutes to get back in? The interruptions are continuous.
It's really tough right now, and people are spread thin and they're exhausted, and we have to reframe some of our beliefs around what work looks like. And, in the past, when we were all going into offices or that type of thing, the container for work was, for most people, an 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 kind of a container. Now, when people are working virtually and remotely who aren't accustomed to it, they haven't created the containers for work, and they're still trying to fit it into that 8 to 5 or the same old container that they had before. Now we need to be thinking about, okay, what are the blocks of time that I am going to work with focus and diligence? What are the goals that I need to achieve or the tasks that I need to get done? And we need to start measuring ourselves on outcomes and goal achievement versus seat time. How many hours am I sitting at that computer? A lot of the frustration I hear from people is around the fact that their seat time is interrupted by kids and family and pets and who knows what, other people needing the computer. And so you need to change the paradigm to how am I doing, what are the 5 things I need to get done today? What are the 25 things I need to get done this week? How am I doing in terms of achieving those goals versus how many hours am I sitting, staring at the computer uninterrupted? The high-tech world has a lot to teach us about this because they've been working remotely for years. And people measure their success based on outcomes, not based on seat time. It's a very different paradigm.
Very different paradigm, and all sorts of physical things and environmental things that you would have in your day that you would think, oh, this is good because that happened, right? Just driving to the office is an accomplishment, right? That doesn't, it's like, I'm here, whereas
well,
now,
when I talk about the container, that's what I'm talking about. So we're used to, an example of one client I work with, he's very used to getting up in the morning, going to the gym, showering at the gym, grabbing a coffee and whatever, going into the office, and then centering down to do his work. And he was feeling really lost at the beginning of the pandemic. And so we had to reimagine what the start to his day would look like for him so that he knew he was entering the work container. because otherwise he was so adrift, he couldn't find a way to ground himself. And so it's just creating some new rituals about what it means to get going and what it means to end. Ending is really important.
So true. I can't say enough about this conversation so far in terms of just the value and the lift that many people will get inside of their business and inside of their life around communication, specifically around feedback. But also, I think I would just want to ask about the book and other things that they might get out of it. I mean, I often hear people talk about their client situations. Maybe it's a sales situation where the client, they're trying to sell something or trying to get an engagement with a new client. And they will say, well, the client said this. And then that was it. It's like, well, what else? Did you ask a question? Did you get deeper information about that? They take it at face value, just like we talked about with someone says, oh, they say one thing and right away we say, what was it? It was, I don't know what the next step is. Oh, well, you don't know. Well, let me answer that for you. Whereas there's another layer of questioning that would take it even deeper and more and get to the truth. And I think, that communication is so undervalued in terms of being a great communicator. It makes you great at so many things inside the business, not just sales, but it's empowering staff and working with staff and getting things done and having, a fulfilling life. It comes to communication. And like you say, it's not really taught in business, but yet it's new. It's an opportunity. How will your book help them become better communicators?
Well, the Mastering Feedback, to subtitle Everything You've Never Been Told About Giving Feedback, goes into a lot of scenarios. It's a concise book. It's a slim book. It does not take a long time to read it. But it's packed with questions, curious questions, the value of those and how to utilize those. It has the step-by-step, 4-step process with worksheets that asks you to do some thinking about what type of communication you need to deliver, and then going through the process of framing that. It's a process that can be used again and again and again, regardless of what type of scenario you're in. There's activities the whole way through the book that people can begin experimenting with that are really low stakes, low risk, and you just do them as part of your workday to begin to see how different things feel and what you notice in different communications. So it's a really practical guide on how to move through this process and begin reorienting yourself. Now, for folks who want to learn about the really foundational components of navigating challenging dialogue, we have an online class that anybody can sign up and register for. I'm in the chat room on that all the time, communicating with people, helping people through scenarios. And that gives you you leave there with a more in-depth process for framing emotionally challenging conversations that you need to have with people. So you're preparing to give a client really bad news. You're preparing to give a staff person difficult information. You are working to answer, which we're all faced with right now, unanswerable questions. How many questions are you being asked right now that you have no idea what the answer is, because we're in a whole new paradigm, in a whole new existence? So both the book and the online class will support you through those.
Wonderful. It's a foundational piece to life, communicating. And so can't say enough about going and doing the work. If you were going to sharpen your saw on a particular area, this particular area is going to have an impact on lots of parts of the business and produce a lift, not only, I think, in terms of effectiveness in the business, but just quality of life, like you said about the manager that got just, a couple of tweaks and now has less overwhelm in their life. So really fantastic content. And where can we learn more about your book and also this online course?
Our website is navigatingchallengingdialogue.com. And we also have a free whole resource area of videos particularly designed for managers. So people can go in and watch those on a variety of topics. I think there's 14 of them that people can access. So we also have lots of free information, but navigatingchallengingdialogue.com. Or you can find me personally, Beth Wonson, on all the social media channels.
Wonderful. Well, Beth, again, thank you. This has been fantastic. Thanks for your generosity in being on the show.
Thank you.
And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper Podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.